The road from the capital Tripoli to Brega is lined with the aftermath of war. Towns abandoned as the population fled the bombardment. This is what's left of the civilian airport in the city of Roslanouf, home to one of the country's key oil refineries. The last plane took off from this runway just hours before it was hit.
While NATO insists on it's only hitting the targets of military value, locals say these telecommunications towers some 15 kilometers west of the town of Brega has been destroyed in a NATO attack. The eyewitnesses are saying they've been 2 airstrikes and they've also accidentally burned 2 cars and killed 2 civilians. Since then, there is no TV in this area, and as we can see, phone line has also been disrupted.
There is no water and no electricity. What used to be heaven, this man says, has become hell. What was home now feels unfamiliar.
I have 9 children and I sent them all to my relatives abroad. I don't want them to see their motherland in such a condition.
From this small port, not far from Brega, Libyan gas used to flow to Europe.
We used to produce fuel to send it to them, and now see, they destroy it all. This is terrible and ridiculous at the same time.
The closer you get to the front line, the more you feel it. You can hear the war, and you can even read it. On NATO's leaflets, it drops just before the bombers arrive.
This one says, as you can see, there is a sign here in Arabic that NATO is here in Libya to enforce a no-fly zone over the country to protect civilians. On the other side, there is another sign also in Arabic saying that NATO can attack any place at any time.
This any time happened 3 times over several hours while we were filming.
Brega, Libya's major oil port, is where the frontline lines divided the country into 2 parts, into 2 sworn sides. It's been a frequent flashpoint between the rebels and Gaddafi's forces. It's a very important point, a strategic location. Getting a firm handle on this town would mean taking control over the country's economy.
Oil facilities seem to be a rare target that NATO bombs never land on, while it looks like the civilian population can hardly escape.
They were like my family. That day, I had just gone to the shop to buy some food, and this happened. 6 of them died. I couldn't believe it.
And this used to be a restaurant for oil company staff, where friends gathered after work.
We were eating with my colleagues, then there was a boom. We knew what that was, we ran. We tried to help those who were trapped. Then the helicopters came too, and started to shoot to us, as if they didn't want us to save our friends.
The African Union has condemned France for supplying weapons to Libyan rebels. Its chief said the move threatens to put the entire region at risk. On Wednesday, France became the first NATO country to openly admit to arming tribal fighters who are striving to topple Colonel Gaddafi. Rebels have recently been making gains and hope to advance on Tripoli. But for more on this, we're joined now by John Laughlin, the Director for the Institute of Democracy and Cooperation in Paris. Thanks for joining us here on RT. France is once again at the forefront of NATO's campaign in Libya, now airdropping weapons to the rebels. Some analysts say the move contravenes the UN embargo on arms supplies to Libya. What's your take on that?
Well, obviously it does, and it also makes a nonsense of the whole argument in favour of the war in the first place. That argument, as you know, was predicated on the idea, on the accusation that the Libyan government was attacking civilians. Well, the admission that France is arming the rebels is very obviously an admission that what's going on in Libya is a fight between the government and armed rebels. And armed rebels are not civilians. So any attack by the government on armed rebels in Libya is therefore not necessarily a war crime. In other words, this news is not only incompatible with the case that's being made for war in Libya, it completely contradicts it.
Incompatible, but are other countries likely to follow in France's footsteps in terms of arming rebels, do you think?
Well, Britain, of course, is giving money to them, and presumably they're using that money for certain purposes. I don't imagine they're giving it to charity. And it's quite possible that other countries are, I'm thinking, of course, of the United States, are giving other forms of support, or possibly arms covertly. So there is no doubt that the three countries, Britain, France, and America, who are waging this war, under the disguise of NATO, of course wish to see the rebels seize power by force and over.
Shamsi Air Base has long been shrouded in secrecy. It was originally set up as a recreational airfield for Arab royalty looking to go hunting. Then, as the US war in Afghanistan intensified, it was leased in what's alleged to be a convoluted deal between Pakistan, the United Arab Emirates, and America. What we now know is that these deadly but pilotless drones have flown out of Shamsi Base. The drone strike program is a key component in the US arsenal. Drones can stay up in the air for long periods of time, and using sophisticated weaponry, they can act quickly on real-time intelligence. Drone strikes have been concentrated in Pakistan's northwest. The US claimed that that area is a safe haven for the Taliban and other jihadist groups, and it goes on to say that the border region is one of the most dangerous areas in the world. Now, so far, there have been 30 strikes this year. That's up from this time last year. But according to human rights groups, drone strikes aren't as accurate as the US claims. Hundreds of civilians have died, and that's led to the rise of anti-US sentiment. Now, even though it's publicly condemned the strikes, privately it's known that Pakistan has supplied the US with intelligence. But since the US raid on a compound deep within the country that killed Osama bin Laden, it's been under incredible pressure domestically to review its ties with the US. Pakistan's responded to that raid, of which it wasn't informed, by publicly scaling down American presence in the country. By blocking the US from using this base, Pakistan is flexing its muscles. But reports also suggest that the base hasn't been used since 2009. Once again, observers are wondering whether Pakistan is playing a double game, publicly saying one thing, but privately doing.
Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Thursday, June 30th, 2011. I'm Darko. This is part 2 of this news bulletin for today. My website is www.ggnonline.com. That's ggnonline.com. All right, this first article we have up is Libya opposition says it needs more weapons. So you go out there and check that out. It says China and Russia raised concerns over revelations that France has supplied arms to civilians fighting Gaddafi's forces. Then we have US-EU warn against Libyan arms flow to al-Qaeda or al-Qaida as we know it. The US and European Union warned Thursday the threat of Libyan armed weapons making their way to al-Qaeda's offshoot in North Africa's Sahel region. Then Spain, al-Qaeda possibly buying Libyan war weapons. What else would they be used for? It says here UK refuses to supply arms to Libya, so they'll give them a cash donation and then they can go spend it on arms. Russia arming Libya rebels is, quote, a crude violation. Accused France on Thursday of committing a crude violation of UN weapons embargo by arming Libyan rebels, while Washington said it was acting legally, creating a new diplomatic dispute over the Western air war. Then look at this. So they did this too. Senate panel okays U.S. operation in Libya, so this is a big deal. U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee has passed a resolution that authorizes continued American participation in the NATO-led war in Libya, and of course I watched part of this, and it will set a precedent or precedents for the future. So that they just go in there and do what they want unilaterally and just start bombing people, and it doesn't really matter what it's for. So it's here, gloomy future for Gaddafi as NATO escalates strikes on Libya. 3 months of NATO airstrikes have left Libya with masses of debris and no sign of scaling down as the future Libyan leader, Colonel Gaddafi, remains gloomy. And yeah, they're basically going after him now. Bahrain riot, police fired tear gas at protesters. In Bahrain, they fired tear gas and stun grenades Thursday to disperse thousands of opposition supporters gathered near the square that was the epicenter of the nation's Shiite-led demonstrations earlier this year, an activist said. Then moving on to Ivory Coast, says it has urgent need to restore order, says the United Nations. UN envoy to Ivory Coast urged the government Thursday to restore law and order by deploying police and sending former rebels who helped President Ouattara seize power back to their barracks. So they're done with the, I don't know if you want to call them goons or whatever, but there was a slaughter towards the end of it when France came in and started bombing people, and there was a lot of bodies and mass graves, but that was never ever talked about. And what also is not talked about either is that, you know, it's not over. There's still people that are still pro-Bagbo. It says here, some Ivorians complain the fighters have been carrying out reprisals and harassing civilians seen as pro-Bagbo. So go there and check that out. And of course, they just forced that on to the people. Got a nice sort of blowing stuff up so the people will capitulate and want it to end, and they did. And then they got their puppet, and their drones attacked 2 Somali militant leaders. Unmanned aircraft attacked 2 leaders of this militant Somali group with ties to al-Qaeda. So CIA carrying out strikes against CIA-led forces. Terrorists, says here, Syrian forces take Mountainous province near Turkish border, 11 killed. This is also big news. Syrian army forces spread throughout a restive mountainous area near the Turkish border on Thursday as the death toll from a 2-day military siege rose to 19 people, according to activists. And then we have U.S. monthly combat deaths in Iraq at 3-year highs. So the war in Iraq is over and troops are home. So you didn't see that. That doesn't exist, didn't happen. UN violence on the rise in Afghanistan. UN report says violence in Afghanistan increased 51% in the past 3 months, despite the presence of about 150,000 U.S.-led forces in the country. No, that's probably why it's more violent, because they're there. Afghans arrest former officials of Kabul Bank. Another deal with this Kabul Bank here says, on Thursday, they detained the former chairman and chief executive of Kabul Bank. The first arrest since widespread graft was exposed at the lender nearly a year ago. Then Pakistan attack kills 22 Afghans. Says Pakistani armed forces reportedly fired rockets on an area in neighboring Afghanistan. Says killing as many 22 people. Says Afghan officials say a number of women and children were among the dead. Yemenis blast Saudi meddling. Yemeni anti-government protesters have once again held demonstrations condemning Saudi Arabia's interference in the country's internal affairs. Then we have Lebanon. UN ruling needs evidence. Lebanon requests evidence supporting the recent indictment issued by a U.S.-backed UN tribunal probing the 2005 assassination of former Lebanese Premier Rafik Hariri. Okay, Israeli plane violates Lebanese airspace. So Canadian aid convoy to head for Gaza. So a lot of people heading out there, at least trying to. Irish activists say Israel sabotaged flotilla vessel. So go in there and check that out. Then it has Israeli security chiefs differ on Gaza flotilla's potential danger. And then we have Palestinians condemn Islamic leader arrest. So they staged a protest in Palestine or in the Palestinian territories condemning the arrest of the Islamic leader Sheikh Rashid Salah by the British authorities in London earlier this week. Then we have U.S. Senate vetoes Palestinian UN bid, and kind of 180 there for the U.S. Chief Rabbi, equality laws leading to new Mayflower exodus. I have to keep moving for time's sake, so I advise you to go in there and check that out. Links will be posted. Israeli rabbi urges killing of non-Jews. An ultra-Orthodox Israeli rabbi has defended the killing of non-Jews, including infants, in his new book on ways to tackle threats against Israel. Al-Qaeda, or al-Qaida propaganda forum, forced offline, so the CIA took their little website down there. Nearly 600 injured in Cairo, clashes between police and protesters. And then we have this, U.S. Muslim Brotherhood contacts to resume. So, like I said, I was talking about that before. Earlier video, new counter-terror strategy resets on adherence. And guess what that's right, you, the patriots here in the United States. I've been talking about this for, almost a year and a half now. The Obama administration's new counterterrorism strategy, the first since the killing of Osama bin Laden, who's actually been dead for 7 years, will focus on a would-be terrorist in the United States who is inspired by al-Qaeda's or al-Qaeda, the CIA's a terrorist group, hateful ideology, the president's top advisor for Homeland Security and counterterrorism said Wednesday. So now they are turning it inwards towards American people. Top Obama advisor Homeland is a primary focus of counterterrorism. So there you go, another story covering it. Azirs urge pro-hijab activists release. Azerbaijani people have gathered in front of the presidential building in the capital of Baku to demand the release of a pro-hijab activist arrested in May. China salutes 90 years of communism, which was created by the banks. Says here, China says its naval drills, no cause for alarm. A lot of drills going on. Obama honors retiring Defense Secretary Robert Gates. We got the Presidential Medal of Freedom. and all he was doing was helping enslave people, so a little double think there. And of course we have General Petraeus now taking over as director of the CIA, so there you go. Lets you know pretty much all you need to know. 2 Canadian soldiers charged over a training and manslaughter of a colleague. This is GGN, and I'm Darko. Thank you.